what all these different financial services are offering all of us is that you must understand what they mean for you, and you must be honest with what's happening with your own money.
A lot of things is about living within your means and being comfortable that this is a journey.
Welcome to yet another episode of Earnings Unleashed, a podcast brought to you by FloatPays. My name is Andisa Liba. I am the host for this conversation, and our podcast is centered around unlocking the pay potential of all your employees. In studio with me today to talk all things around money script, I've got two wonderful executives. First on my left is Amanda John-Ncube, who is a financial services leader, business coach, as well as author. Welcome, Amanda, to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. And next to Amanda is Viwe Tini. Viwe is, of course, the CEO of Vunani Securities. Viwe, thank you very much for joining the conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. So, ladies, we've got so much to unpack today. I call this conversation the money script, and it really is centered around powerful ideas to help build a brighter financial future. But I think before we get into that, there's so much behind the psychology of money and the scripts we have been led to believe, either by the way of our conditioning growing up. For example, for me, my first reference to savings was through the Stokvel model. And so, so when I first saw savings in action, it was because my mother and my aunts and grandmothers and the likes were all part and parcels of different Stokvels that service different needs. But I also recognize and realize that a lot of those money scripts are so embedded in my DNA, and in my formative years really fostered how I construct my relationship with money and how I engage with money. And so to set the scene and the caveat, that's our conversation today. But before we sink our teeth into all of this, perhaps for the benefit of our audience, Amanda, I'll start with you. Won't you introduce yourself? We've got some of your books that are here today. We can talk very briefly around, the literature that you've written, because you advocate very strongly around financial inclusion across the board.
Thanks, Andy. I think you've done a good enough, job in terms of introducing me. I think where I'm going to go with it is I am a financial services professional. I have been a financial planner. I've been an advisor. And I am a client to a financial advisor. I have studied financial planning as well. And I think when I realized that I will not always sit in front of clients, I will not always serve and educate and empower and help clients to embed and implement certain solutions, I knew that I had to ask myself the question of what then happens to the experience and the knowledge. And I guess that's when Nelly and myself sat together and we're like, you know what, we need to put together something that really kind of takes itself out there without needing me or you to sit in front of people to actually educate them. And I guess hence the books that we've put together, both for adults, for employee wellness, by the way, as well as for children. We both have kids, and that became quite a critical thing to say, if we are empowering and educating people around financial literacy, not only terms, but behaviors and mindsets and habits and understanding, where does that leave the next generation or two? And that, for me, became a very important conversation to drive, to say we need to not only educate the adults, but we need to educate the children. And hopefully one day, things like very holistic financial literacy will become a part of our, public education in terms of skills development, because I do believe that financial literacy is a very, very critical financial skill.
I love that model of cradle to grave, right? So how do we take people on the journey from when they're really little in the form of children, and how do we start introducing the concept of financial management, money, and how do you engage, in the realm of all things financial practices? So love that. Viwe, I'm going to come to you. You are the Chief Executive Officer of Vunani Securities. For the benefit of our audience, if you can briefly introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about the work that you guys do at Vunani Securities.
Thank you, Andy. At Vunani Securities is a stockbroking firm. What we do is we invest on the exchanges. We do equities investments as well as derivatives. There are different, and as we are conversing, I do understand that some of this language is a little bit specific to specific sectors in financial services. And so as we are having the conversation, we'll unpack a little bit of that. Further to that, you asked a question that I rather enjoy. You asked about the psychology of money and the relationship with money. I understand myself to be in a relationship with money, an incredibly loving relationship with money. Money loves me. Money knows me by name. Money looks for me. Money seeks me out. I've had this language about money since I was 12 years old, which is when my journey with money started. I have been entrepreneurial for a really long time. I started off at the age of 12 with selling sweets and chocolates. And I saw the kind of financial freedoms that gave me. I suddenly had extra money for a budget. I haven't had a budget. I could navigate financial needs. I didn't have to go to my parents and ask for money all the time. By the time I was 15, I had figured out how to get multiple streams of income. Because I moved from the smaller nyana business of selling sweets.
Right.
I was working elsewhere over the weekend. I was working elsewhere during the break times at school. I think I've always had a thing about money makes things work. And so I need to understand money. So I got into a relationship with money at a really early age. I have been fortunate and privileged to have found myself with a qualification such as chartered accountancy. I had no intention of becoming a chartered accountant. However, life made it so that I am, and all it has done is that it has increased my capacity to learn. It has opened my navigation channels, because if you consider it, a lot of us have rural backgrounds.
Yeah.
And the way that financial markets in particular are modeled is not so that it's easy to grasp for somebody with a background like the one that we have.
Yeah.
So being able to navigate and being able to pick up the additional skills as I'm walking my career's journey has put me in a position where I believe I have privilege. And so I would like to be able to use that privilege to be able to educate as many of people with backgrounds similar to myself as I possibly can.
Yeah, I love that, and I love the recognition of understanding your position of privilege, because we don't candidly talk enough about that. And how do we take our privileges and to repurpose them for, I think, the betterment of society.
Absolutely.
Viwe, you opened the vault so boldly. So we're diving right into the conversation. And I want to start with Amanda, because Amanda, you've given the theory language. And I think particularly in a society and in a country where we have such diversity in terms of language, and yet more often than not, the language of business is English. And so for those who have to oscillate and code and decode, some things may not be as simple as they may seem. What do you think is the power behind language? And I think deconstruction of language as it comes to financial literacy. We're diving right into Viwe's vault.
I like that, because growing up, I think you guys will be familiar with this. In school, teachers will always say, just kiss. And you're thinking, kiss, and they say, keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah.
Don't try to be overwhelming. Don't try to sound smart. Don't try to share knowledge and educate people and empower people and forget that you actually literally need to meet them where they are.
Yeah.
So language for me is very important. And the way we wrote Incwadi Zethu was so that any person who reads it, really you have to be familiar, I guess, with English, as opposed to you come across certain things where you even need a dictionary.
Right.
You shouldn't really
Jargon.
need a dictionary.
Yeah.
And I love what you've just asked about the language, because Uneli and I are actually writing a Christmas series. Ayam specifically is going to be in Xhosa.
Beautiful.
Ayam is going to be in isiZulu, because we understand the importance of educating and empowering children, especially in this particular conversation, and that many of them don't even know how to read English, right? Many of them are going into those rural schools still. And we're saying, well, we can reach them where they're at and we can convey the messages and the education in such a manner that they can understand it and a manner that they can enjoy. So in addition to the books, we actually digitized the kids' book into a gamified platform called Moneyland. The reason we did that, and my son, who's now 11, back then 8, is the voice of Randy in the digital platform. And the reason we did that is because I strongly believe that children learn the way that accommodates each of them. And each of them is so different that if you think bazawufunda ngencwadi, you're very mistaken. Some of them learn a lot more by touching things. Some of them learn a lot more by seeing things static and in movement. So we kind of took all of those different concepts. I mean, when we wrote the kids' book and then digitized, I was like, oh, I wish I really understood children kakulu. Not only from being a parent to 2 of them, but really and like how their brains work so that we can package these tools in such a way that they just get it. So we've got board games, we've got the digital platform because we truly, truly believe that abantwana also learn. You might be speaking English, but maybe for some, English must be funny. You know, for some, it must be very serious. You know, for others, it must just not make sense. It's fine if it doesn't make sense to me, but I get it. So we try to really incorporate all of those things because we believe in the language. And sometimes I think language isn't only written and spoken, it's actually also seen. Now we're at your adulthood, you still learn by seeing certain things. You still learn by experiencing and feeling and touching certain things. So I think those are the things for me that incorporate the term language. I think it goes beyond words and terminologies and speaking. You know, I think it's about so many other things.
I love that so much because you're quite right? Learning isn't linear, right? There's a full spectrum. And it's important that we oscillate between, I think, actual physical literature in the form of a book. But now in this day and age where technology sits at the epicenter of how we move through spaces, right? If you think about how many of us operate apps from our phones, right? So from banking apps to how we connect with our friends and family and loved ones, right? You know, so technology. Love that, but you know, I mean, I just think language, you know, and in the inclusivity of language needs to be widened in spectrum, and we often take for granted the role that it plays in part of that education because of that very fact that sometimes English sits at the center of it, and we take for granted that people's learning capabilities may not necessarily always have a center of gravity that's English. And so I really, really love that you've created this broad spectrum of opportunities to learn and to learn differently. But really language, you know, and in the inclusivity of language needs to be outside of the comfortable norms. And so I have such an appreciation for your work and in how you've been intentional about understanding South Africa. And I think Africans at large and our ability to digest information in different formats. Viwe, I want to come back to you because you've led us down this rabbit hole so beautifully, and we're here now. And for you as a chartered accountant and having that kind of background, how important do you think you know, the power of taking off jargon, because what we're seeing from data and some stats is that people sink into debt cycles because they've either seen a cell phone contract that they didn't quite fully understand. It kind of sort of made sense because of the excitement of acquiring this, you know, this gadget or asset. And maybe in oblivion, they sign on the dotted line, and then they wake up 6 months later, and you can't believe the repayment terms, or even otherwise the application of interest on that debt. What are some of your thoughts around how can we deconstruct a lot of the financial jargon as someone who comes from a very complicated world of finance and language?
So I love what you said about bringing it home. And mine and my concept, in as much as one can try and simplify the language. And I don't love jargon because I think it's built to exclude specific people and to limit the conversation to an elitist society, which is something that I think is bogus for people who want to turn around an economy and who want to drive financial inclusion. So allow me to step into my rural background. I think that the point that you made earlier about meeting people exactly where they are is key. And where people are, and you segment it according to different age groups. And when I'm speaking to a person in their 40s to 50s, 60s, what is the language that I'm using there? When I'm speaking to a person in their 20s, what is the language there? Teenagers, pre-teens, etc. So for me, I go as far as when I have an audience that I can explain concepts to. If you want to understand mergers and acquisitions, I'm a page, do you remember the game of marbles? What you do is you hit it. Once you hit it, you get it right. Then you can take that on. And as more of the other person, that is a merger. You are merging and you are acquiring other assets. You're talking about savings. Savings. What's this game? Yeah. Upuca is you draw a large sum out. That's what you get paid at the end of the month. And then there is a sum of that you're not going to be able to use because that goes back into the vault.
Correct.
It's savings. And in as far as you growing in your financial literacy into financial wellness journey, think about hopscotch. It is a journey. It is not something that you start from the beginning and then you don't start in preschool and then the next day you are in matric. It is a journey. And so try and look at the things that are around us. There's so many resources. All of the things that make us who we are, it's a matter of converting those into conversable language that we can understand. Because when I say to you, so imagine, the way we both understand that the bulk of it has to go back, but we keep one. Now, that is explaining the concept. Earlier this morning, I had an opportunity to speak to the ladies at work that, the support staff, the cleaning, tea. And I said to them, because I walked into the kitchen and two were missing. And I said, where are the other two? And they said, I get we got paid, so we went shopping. And I felt it here. And I said, let's do a session. I would like you to... The fact that you work in a company that has all of these financial services and you don't understand money is unacceptable. I'm going to organize a team and we're going to unpack what it is that Vunani Securities does, what it is that other institutions do. You spoke earlier about Stokvel. Love that concept. But the thing about it is, as brown people, we keep it at 12.5. We collect the money and then we buy 12.5 at the end of the month. But now imagine this. Give it some heels. Give it a little bit of lipstick. Take it further. Still have a Stokvel, right? But instead of buying 12.5 at the end of the year, throughout the period of the Stokvel, say it's a year, you are seeking out investment opportunities. You find credible stockbrokers like Vunani Securities. You find credible stockbrokers and you trade. If that's not comfortable for you, you get in your personal capacity, unit trust. But there's a lot of segues into the world of financial services. And I think what we need to do is perhaps take a step back from trying to force that down people's throats, this jargon that leaves everybody confused, but speak to people where they are and use concepts that they are familiar with that will help them understand the concept much easier and much quicker.
I love that so much because it is really true and I think it resonates. July in South Africa is deemed to be National Savings Month. And there's been a big call out on a national level to encourage people to save more money, to be mindful of their futures, to set themselves up in the form of emergencies. And I think, of course, we know that we're not great at savings as a nation. What are some of your thoughts around how do we encourage people? And I'll start with Amanda to start actively saving. And so how do we evolve from maybe basic concepts like a stokvel, right? And evolve from a food stokvel to maybe a life-saving stokvel. Like, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's different variations out there. But, you know, where's a good, simple starting place?
I'll take it back to where my parents started with us, you know.
Piggy bank.
Exactly. You know, with the darker blue bank, which my parents banked with forever. One of the things I can't forget is the smell of the bank. Andingena no my mom or with my dad. And it's them going into what I now know was a financial advisor's office at the bank.
Yeah.
So bangene, and every time my little brother and I walked out, they would always give us the little blue teddy bears.
Yes.
Where we could keep money. And
I remember
money
those.
did we keep. People still do it differently. I believe I don't know, it just brings a different sense of commitment because you see it.
Yeah.
And I always say, and I mean, when we launched Moneyland, we launched it with little cute wooden houses that were actually a piggy bank, but it was the money bank. I mean, the house bank, right? Because abantwana actually want to experience and feel that achievement and even hear the coin, like, like imali yami is in, you know? And then now they've upgraded to wanting to put notes there. So I think to your point around you go back to Obuta and all of these things, it's true. It actually starts there.
Yeah.
Yes, those kind of things like the stokvels have actually slightly become upgraded. Abantu now are starting to save together as siblings, as friends in terms of probably helping each other to buy or to have a deposit for property. You know, so that might mean a much longer term of savings.
Yeah.
So some people still prefer to save like that and not necessarily formalize it. Does it have advantages and disadvantages? Of course, it always will. But I still go back to the point that the more people understand why they're doing what they're doing and they can stick to the term that they've committed to and they know what the end result is going to be, the more people are likely to actually stick it through, you know, because they've got something tangible. And I think that's why Abandube to still enjoy the stock felling, because niateta all the time. You get
and
to
it's a
see
sense
each
of community,
other.
right?
Yes, you get to see each other. I mean, not to say with your planner, you're not going to engage, but of course, you're not going to engage as much as you're going to engage with your buddies if you're all saving together. So there's that thing Abantu want to enjoy about the journey of money. So in the books, we actually have quite a lot of games. Believe it or not, we've taken the concepts of true or false. We've taken the concept. So each chapter, at the end of each chapter, there's a game there that people can enjoy because it takes them back to childhood.
And it's nostalgic, right?
No, fill in the missing word. It's there. No, you know, crossing, you know.
Crossword puzzles.
Yes, we've got all of that. But even where the one word and its meaning, you kind of get to connect them. That's how we learned as kids, the whole primary. And it does something to you, whatever children's psychologists and education people are going to describe it as, but it does do something. And I think for me, we need to not forget where those things, you know, stem from and what it does to you. So I think taking it maybe like into the more formalized financial planning world, I think even financial planners need to start engaging people in that manner. Which is again taking us back to meet people where they at. Remind people why they're doing this now new thing. Not all of us had parents who sat around a table and spoke about money. Not all of us had parents who went into a branch and their financial advisor gave them the money bank. Right? So to your question, I'm sorry I digressed there a bit.
No.
Going
this
into National Savings Month, we've actually been shopping around, and I think I told you this about 2 or 3 weeks ago, with some news coming up soon as well. We've been shopping around for cartoon character money boxes. So about Donald Duck, about Mickey, and I know I'm speaking about the children a lot, and these things can obviously be related to the adults as well. But I believe if we change a lot of the younger generation now, this is not a conversation we're going to be having as a problem in 10, 20 years' time.
Absolutely.
It's going to be something we celebrate so much
Yeah.
because that now 8-year-old who's going to be almost 30, graduated with a job and possibly with a child and possibly even married, will understand money so differently. So we've been shopping around for the kind of things that will excite umdana to save and will encourage the parent to understand what does this cartoon character mean for the child.
Right.
You already know what it means to them when they're watching it on your tablet.
Yeah.
Can you monetize it? Can you help them make sense
Ooh,
of
come on.
how do I bring this to teaching umdanam the models and the concepts and the understanding and the mindset shifts and the behaviors around money so that either they don't make the same mistakes that I did or they grow up in a cultured home that has some kind of a financial culture. And I think for me, those are the things that we need to be driving a lot more of in those months of National Savings Month.
I like that you've touched on creating a new subset of culture around money, because we've of course seen the evolution of even the stokvel. I mean, when stokvels as a concept was started, it was about the power of community buying, right? It's about community economic buying power, right? To be able to go into a cash and carry and, and get preferential rates or a discount where we're able to stretch money.
But
and
they
to
could relate to community.
Precisely.
Community at that time made sense to those people. So bringing that home made it a lot easier for them.
Yeah, love that. I want to talk, ladies, about some manuscripts that have informed your formative years, or even some manuscripts that kind of still sit in the peripheral of your life when you think about how you engage with financial institutions, when you engage with money from a currency perspective. And maybe we'll start with Viwe. I mean, I know your journey looks a little different in that you had a great head start.
I was one of the kids who kind of had the blue teddy bear.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you look back now and reflect, like, what do you think have been some of the manuscripts that have held you in good stead? So if you look at where you come from with that sort of landing and background to where you are now, where you are a chief, executive officer of an FSP, right? How has that growth and that journey been the last couple of years for you?
The last couple of years? Look, I think I said earlier that, first of all, the psychology that I have with money is that it's a relationship. And I think because you're using all these big titles when you're talking to me, you're talking chartered accountant, you're talking CEO, people will assume that I speak like that because it's a function of the position. No. A relationship is a relationship. Sometimes things go well and sometimes things don't go well. My standpoint where money is concerned is that it's just we're going through a rough patch right now.
Right.
And that things will come right. So I don't want people to look at people and say, listen, people have problems that are the size of their lifestyle. Everybody's got, I think you were a little bit unfair to me because I do want to have something to say on the savings, but we'll come back to that. But in as far as the scripting is concerned for me, I having learned early, things like you don't eat capital. At the time,
Yeah.
Because once you eat the capital, you won't be able to go back and buy stock because I know the prices that I get my sweets at the sweet shop where I get my sweets and my chocolates. So I understand that whatever my spending is for the month, I need to make sure that the amount that I have reserved for the capital is there so that I can keep the wheel churning.
Sure.
And I think it significantly helped me in my entrepreneurial journey because I do understand myself to not be a person that loves sitting behind a computer and pulling up spreadsheets necessarily. I love being able to read that information and understand it and use it to direct the business, use it to be able to derive the strategy. But in the grander scheme of things, really, if you think about it as a relationship and understanding that relationships go through tough times, I think you will have a lot more discipline to it and you will be less pressured to try and come out looking like Amanda. If Amanda's got the next expensive car, the next expensive bag, which I think is a very silly thing. I don't understand why people are buying bags in the first place when you could be buying assets that are making money for you.
Yeah.
If you'll allow me, I'd like to touch a little bit on the savings. Savings. This is what I always challenge people to do. Please, tonight, and I know it's not a pleasant experience, and for those of you who will not have access to your bank statements tonight, please tomorrow morning, get 3 months bank statements. Have a look at your spending habits. Have a look at who you are. And have a look at what you'd like to change. Have a look at who you are today, who you'd like to be in a year's time, who you'd like to be in 2 years' time, and what are the changes that you need to make. And I always start the conversation at savings. And once we've got that in check, we understand, okay, there's this thing called a budget. It's an instrument that's built to keep me in the black, because being in the red is not what I want to be.
Yeah.
So then once you have that, then you are comfortable, and then you can start venturing out and asking questions about investments. You spoke earlier, the both of you, about the stokvels and the community of it. I have also come across some conversations where there's that conversation about the envelopes. Those are all beautiful concepts, and they were okay for a time when we didn't know better. Now we know better. And people such as ourselves, the three of us in this conversation, we have a responsibility to get the people that don't know better still out of that condition where they don't know better to a place where we understand better. So you spoke about the community of stokvels. The thing about if you do continue stokveling, you still keep the community, you still meet, you still have where you get to hang out with your girls, your friends. But now what you do is you invest those funds. Now you have opened yourself up to different forms of income. You've got dividends that can come out of that, which if all we're doing is we're giving each other, say, 1,000 rand a month, at the end of the year, we're going to have 12,000 rand. Because that's the math of it. However, when you start putting in now the intricacies of being in financial markets, what you're doing is you're also grabbing onto more income. You've got dividends, you've got the yield of what the instrument is that you are invested in. You've got financial advisors that you can chat to, and please don't be afraid to make use of the financial resources that you have at your availability, at your fingertips. If you've got a bank account, you can call up the bank and find out what are the options that are available for you for savings. What are the different interest rates that they have, because they normally have different pockets. I spoke a little bit about the envelopes. I'm not angry at the envelopes, but let's bring it to a place where it can actually attract more income for you.
It can do something for you.
Money must not sit. Money must work. Money is your employee. You have employed it. Its job is to do what you are asking it to do. That's
I
it.
like that.
That's it. When you come out of and that's how you bring it back to the discipline, because I know I said money is my life, but also we get to a place where we're like, galuksis. Wena, you are my employee.
Right.
This is what we are doing this month. We're not doing anything else. This is what we are doing. This is when you keep yourself accountable. So bring those envelopes, but bring them into a digital form. Like what we have in the banking sector or financial markets, where you can actually earn different yields, you can earn interest, different rates, you have way more options, and your money is actively working for you. Rather than uyifake phansi komatras. If you're lucky and nobody broke into your house.
I love the simplicity of this, and I think we started the conversation with the deconstruction of language and making the conversation accessible. And so when we talk about financial inclusion, it really is to lower the veil of secrecy sometimes.
Absolutely.
And a lot of that is embedded in the language that people don't quite know how to peel back the layers off. Viwe touched, Amanda, on the power of discipline. And I think we're now in July, where it's now, National Savings Month in South Africa. How can we encourage people to have better financial hygiene? And I know Viwe touched very, very highly on it around, and you gave us a very practical example of go and draw down your statements and start identifying patterns, because a lot of those patterns are so deeply ingrained in how you move month on month. And so to break some of that cycle it's also important to understand the pattern. But I think if we're to look at practical things, like in the month of July where, the conversation is rife around how do we continue to encourage people to save, what would you say are maybe one or two practical examples of just good financial hygiene?
So when you talk hygiene, ndicinga ivasilap yam and like my soap and water and a tub and all of that. And I want to make it practical for people. So when you think about financial hygiene, you need to remember that it's not just about earning, then spending, or earning, then putting something away, which it should be that way, and then spending whatever you've got, right? I think there's so much that goes into it. And I'm a mindset person because I like for people to be realistic with their current situations. Iyafana nento yokuba Andy uthi you're going to clean up yourself. Well, if you don't have the water, it's going to be a bit tricky. If you don't have the bathtub, it's a bit tricky. If the soap isn't there, or your face cloth or whatever is not kept in a healthy, state, Mauvasa doesn't do much for you.
Yeah.
So I do believe people need to get their finances to a healthy state. And I think one of the things I can highly, highly recommend, be honest with yourself. National Savings Month.
Yeah.
Be honest. I'm not a big saver, but I actually am. I'm not a big saver in the formal way of how people save. You've got a savings account, whether it's your unit trust or whatever it is, then there's 1,000, whatever it is. I save differently. I try to pay off my car quicker. I try to not have a credit card. I try to, challenge my husband for us to pay the bond much quicker. So that when the time comes and this debt is not hanging over us, we are better able to deal with other things that life is going to throw us at us. Our kids are then going to go to varsity. I have no idea if Gunga is going to want to go to Australia, And I literally want to be prepared that if ever he does, I'm like, okay, I no problem. This, because you don't know what life is going to throw at you, right? And I believe it's a sweet place to be at. So it's a hygiene place to be
it's
at.
A hygiene
it's
factor.
A clean place to be at, but you need to do so much cleaning up before you can actually get there.
Right.
And I think for me, it's really, really being honest with yourself. And I guess it's literally what you said earlier about print the bank statement and have a look at everything. Because if you understand what's all the stuff and the chaos that's happening there, and you know that, okay, indigo private clients, but I leave 480 or 500. Should I be? Is it necessary?
Sure.
You can literally save the whole 400 rands extra there and still pay banking fees. For somebody else, it's like, how do I maximize on my fuel consumption? Go to places where you get your rewards.
Yeah.
My work rewards, I use them to actually buy myself beautiful kitchen gadgets. It works. That means I still save.
Sure.
So but people have different ways of actually saving.
Yeah.
But the nice thing, or rather the best way to maximize on what all these different financial services are offering all of us is that you must understand what they mean for you, and you must be honest with what's happening with your own money. So I think that's the one tip I would probably give people, that be honest, be realistic, and if it means you've fallen, get up, dust yourself off, try again, but try again in a more informed setup this time around so that you can make different decisions.
Yeah. I like that, and it's really, really super practical. Amanda brought up the concept of reward, and I think we know the way we are wired as humans, right? We like a good reward. We like a good rewards, club card or whatever it is that you want to call it. Viwe, how do you think people can oscillate between the relationship of risk and reward and do so in a responsible way around money matters? So, and I ask this because we also don't want to drive consumerism where people are spending too much chasing after a point system, because then that's counterproductive as well, right? And so there's so much ambiguity sometimes in that space of risk and reward particularly around money matters. How can we peel back some of that in a very simple and in a very practical way?
So first, I'm going to give you the typical language that is used in investments, the relationship with risks and reward, being that the higher the risk, the science behind it is that the higher the risk, the more likely the reward is to be higher, right? What that means also is that when one is operating in financial markets, it's not a place that has guarantees. It's a place that requires one to be diligent about doing their homework, doing their research, understanding if you are picking a stock, why are you investing in that stock? Where do you think that company is likely to go that would likely grow your money and grow your interests?
Yeah.
So the relationship is typically that. But I do like how you asked it, because you asked it in a very everyday way, wherein you talk about what is the risk that we're getting ourselves into, whether knowingly or unknowingly, because we so desperately wanted to make sure that we had a thing. Stop buying things you don't afford. Stop buying things you don't afford. And, can I share something with you ladies? I have never in my life had a clothing account. And the reason for it is, chances are you're not going to be naked. You've got something that you can put on. We went through 12 years where we had school uniform on. We had a white shirt every day.
Yeah.
We had a tunic. We had socks. What is required of you to show up in society is for you to be presentable.
Yeah.
It's for you to have covered the necessaries.
Yeah.
So as long as you come across decent, I don't think that you should be trying to buy the next Louis Vuitton bag. You shouldn't be trying to buy the next label. And quite frankly, where's your surname sold? Because these are people's surnames.
Right.
This is a household, and this is generational wealth that you're building for that particular household. Instead, as a young African populace, what would be interesting to see is us moving away from the consumer mentality and rather actually producing for others to be able to consume. And that way we build up our economy. We claim back a lot of the time that has been lost, where the bulk of the populace didn't understand what was going on from a financial perspective. And we are more inclusive in how we do it. We are deliberate as a country. We are deliberate as leaders about how we we make the circle bigger. So that other children can also come and play.
Yeah, right. Amanda, I want to come to you because you really play a very active role in the teaching space around financial inclusion and financial wellness. And I think sometimes these two terms can be used interchangeably and not in a great way. And perhaps if we were to use your analogy you used earlier on KISS, keep it simple, stupid, right? How do we differentiate between the two terms of one, financial wellness, and financial literacy? And what are some maybe distinct markers, between the two terms?
She spoke a lot around some of the terms, right, that are common kuti in financial services.
Yes.
Right.
So the stock markets, the risk and the return and investing in certain ways. And if you think about, the stock market and the JSE and all these listed companies that we can invest in or whatever it is, it's a bucket of goodies.
Yeah.
Now, if nobody's going to tell you how that bucket of goodies works and basically give you the literacy, you can't make decisions and you can't experience that relationship with money in such a manner that it can make you well.
Yeah.
So for you to be financially well, to have financial wellness, you must be financially literate. So I guess for me, that's the difference between the two, that financial literacy is understanding money in its broadness, right? You need to understand money in such a manner that you are even able to articulate to yourself, Hori, okay, I'm earning, I am saving, I am spending, I understand what I've been taught and what works in terms of financial behaviors. But if I bring it really to holistic financial planning, do I understand that if I get disabled and I can no longer work, something totally changes with my finances, then I'm no longer financially well? Do I understand that if I get retrenched, which is never planned for anybody, where does that leave me, right? Do I understand that if ever my partner was the person really paying the bond, dies and did not have a life cover, where does that leave me with a 2 million rand bond or a 400,000 rand bond? So I think being financially well is understanding all of these things around the broadness of money management for you to actually get to a point where you say, I am financially well. I know what risk, even if you're not doing certain things, I know what risk I'm putting on myself by not saving, by not having a life cover, by not having income protection, by not having a car insurance. Imagine, God forbid, you drive out, something happens to you, you still have the debt of your 300,000 or R1 million, car that you must still pay for if you don't protect that particular asset, right? So I think for me, that's the big difference, is that people think because you sat at a session and somebody taught you or helped you understand a certain thing or two, that, I know what I'm going to do. It's like, there's so much to unpack. Hence, we write the books. Hence, you continue with the podcast that is ongoing and unpacking money matters in different ways with different people. So that anybody who's going to listen to it from now going forward, they get all of these beautiful nuggets and are inspired to actually have that relationship with money, and are inspired to have some kind of a financial partner that kind of goes on that journey with them. For me, that's still being financially well. I'm not well if I don't have a financial planner. As much as I said earlier, I used to be a financial planner. I'm not my own financial planner.
Right.
Because there's about bias to my own things. Mans, you're sorted. It's like, are you sorted? No. So I need somebody else to tell me, girl, you're actually not sorted.
Right.
So I think for me, it's that whole relationship thing. Sometimes it goes well, sometimes it's not so great, but it's more likely to oftentimes go well if you've got the literacy of it.
Viwe, as someone who is an advanced learner of the financial systems, by virtue of your educational background, by virtue of the complexity of your work world, how can people expand? And maybe I'm dovetailing on what Amanda has just shared. How can people expand their financial knowledge in truly understanding the instruments? And I ask this against the backdrop of how do we challenge conventional wisdom? So there's the stuff we learned in our grassroots when we came into the workplace, or we've just finished, our education, and we've become, advanced as we've grown and as we've, seen things from the world and etc. And yet somewhere along the journey, perhaps we haven't evolved out of those old mental models. And so are there opportunities for us to challenge conventional thinking and those mental models to expand people's world in and around, how did you put it, making their money work for them?
I'm happy you asked that question. I did bring something for you for today's episode.
You don't say. I like surprises.
So I'm going to direct you to a tool or a place where you will have significant information that's really important, that will demystify a lot of these concepts and a lot of the jargon that we use earlier. We were talking about financial markets, when we were talking about risk and return. Go onto the JSE website, click on For Me. After For Me, there will be several options that are available. Thereafter, you go Learn to Invest. That'll take you to a library of information that'll teach you everything from the basics. What is a share? What is a shareholder? What is a derivative? All the way to the more sophisticated terms, and for the more sophisticated learner or person who's journeying along their investment journey. So that is a wealth of information that the JSE has been brilliant enough to put together so that it's easier to have conversation with people about what it is and how to make it more inclusive, financial markets more inclusive. They're modules, and so they're built like educational modules. And something that I would really like, and I'm probably stitching it in here. Something that I'd really like to convey to your audience is that please have no shame about money. Have no shame about not having it. Have no shame about not understanding it in a way that you believe is sophisticated. Learn, open yourself up to opportunities, be curious. Do not be ashamed of being a certain age and not having certain language bedded down. It's okay. There are specialists in specific fields specifically for that reason.
Yeah.
You are brilliant and amazing at what it is that you do, and that's okay. And these are the tools that are available. And we've got podcasts like these where people such as ourselves come together and have conversation in an attempt to demystify the language, the psychology of it, and to make it feel and look like something that is tangible and something relatable.
Yeah. I love that. I love that so much. I think if we think about generational wealth building, I think a lot of us on this sofa where we've been privileged enough to be the first, right? So the first to, pass the matric, the first to get an undergrad, the first to get an executive job before a certain age, and the list goes on. And I guess my question, if we bring it back to National Savings Month, and I think the psychology of money, what opportunities, I'll pose a question to both of you. What opportunities and maybe some practical examples when we think about paying it forward? And I know, Mans, you touched on it around the simplicity of, gamification and things as simple as like a piggy bank. But I think if we looked at maybe mid-career hires or people who are on the process or in the journey of recalibrating and to shifting the needle and changing some of those old behaviors, what pieces of advice could we give to them? Just basic life strategies that they may not have thought of, or perhaps life strategies that will hold them in good stead as they continue to pursue the journey to financial wellness.
Can I go first?
Please.
Cool. I think there's so many things, Andy, hey? And I know we've touched on the education and people being open to learn other things, because it's only when you learn you realize you actually don't even know enough, and I'm giving my, usual start to my talks when I go out there and I talk to all sorts of people, especially, women who are doing well for themselves. And when people know that they are and think they've got their ducks in a row, I know oftentimes they tend to be caught out with their wills.
Yeah.
And I make everybody stand. I say, if you don't have a will, sit. Then everyone who dies like, oh, I guess, right? I'm like, okay, cool. If it's outdated, sit. If you never listed your beneficiaries, sit. If you have somebody who is a beneficiary, who was a co-signatory as a beneficiary, sit.
Yeah.
Like those are all risks,
Yeah.
right? And we don't get that. And it's such a simple document to complete, sign, and keep or safe keep somewhere, because you believe you've dotted all your I's and crossed your T's.
Yeah.
And it's all together, and then hits the fan much later when something happens to you or something happens to your parents because they did not actually do it the correct way. So I really, really want to say, in keeping it simple, people need to be aware of the fact that even when you think you've got your ducks in a row, it's actually very important to really sit back, reflect on your finances, and understand that there may be certain loopholes or gaps that can almost send you on a
downward trajectory.
You know, and yet you thought your ngendo is just fine.
Yeah.
So, I think for me, that would be one of the challenge that I give people.
Yeah, Viwe?
I love what you said about learning and being open to learning. I am learning every day. It doesn't matter how many years in different facets of financial services I've been in, there's always something new to learn. And on that basis, I am quite comfortable about sharing what little bit I've learned along the journey, because I do have an appreciation that yesterday I didn't know what I know today, and so I know what I know today. So practical things like marriage. Marriage is a contract. Yes, there's flowers, there's hats, there's balloons.
But there's different contractual regimes.
There's confetti. But what you need to understand when you're doing something as practical as getting married is that understand that this is a contract. Understand the terms of the contract. Once there is a death, there is a divorce, there is a lifestyle change of any sort, the terms of the contract stand.
Yeah.
You spoke earlier about if and I wanted you to go in, and I was like, oh man, why she's just floating at the top. You spoke because I had a conversation earlier with the wealth management part of the Vunani group, which is Verso. So I was chatting to her earlier today, and she was talking about, one thing she's always asking me, and I think it's to your point, Andisa, of the psychology of money. This lady actually came into my office and she sat down and she said, I'd like to understand how brown people relate to money. There's certain concepts that I don't understand, like why are you guys so hectic about having cattle? And I was like, oh, okay. And the other thing that we were speaking about earlier this morning, actually, was that in the instance that there is a death when you are married, things like, are the cars insured in the instance of your death? Will that be paid off? Will the houses be paid off? And these are practical, everyday things that we need to be aware of. And to bring it to the everyday person on the street who's going to find a place to go buy their groceries, where you go buy your groceries matters. And leave the Joneses to go shop where they are shopping. It's fine. When Amda, I said, don't be ashamed of wanting to save that extra R1, that extra 50 cents, because it piles up. So do understand where am I most likely to get the best buck for my money.
Yeah.
Something I taught my niece, and she used to laugh, but now she does it. And it's quirky and it's nerdy because, look, I didn't enjoy having to study maths, so I figure I must be able to use it because I did have to do it.
Right.
So when I go make purchases at the shops, groceries, I calculate how much it costs per gram. If it's in grams, if it's liters, per liter, so that I understand which one is the cheaper option. If I do, in fact, go bulk buy, are they, in fact, giving me a cheaper price? Or would it be better off for me to buy 2 of the same size because it will give me the same size, but I will have paid less for it? So it's everyday, simple things. It's not allowing peer pressure to scale you at all. Don't be bothered.
Yeah.
Understand who you are. Understand that your worth is not determined whether you're male or you're female. Your worth is not a function of how much money you have in the bank. Absolutely. Do learn financial literacy. Get to a place of financial wellness. Do get yourself a financial advisor. But do understand that who you are is not a function of the label that you're carrying. It's who you are. Be clean, be presentable, be neat. It's good enough. Then make your money work for you.
Yeah.
Put your money in vehicles that will enable that money to make more money for you.
Right.
As you sleep, your money should not be sleeping. It should be making more money for you so that when you wake up in the morning, you've got a little more to work with. Yeah.
Can I please add to
Yes,
that?
please.
I just want to give your audience an example, something that works for me, right? And I think so many of us, because we get busy, you realize, it's very difficult to go to those stores that you were talking about to go and get your groceries. If you needed to, you'd probably go about 5, 6, 7 times a month, right? So during COVID, that's the one thing I did very well because it was my 1 hour or 90
Power
minutes
hour.
to just get out of the house, breathe a bit, stroll down the aisles, take whatever I needed, take a nice drive back home, listen to my jazz, and get home and I'm like, right, you know? I don't think I do that much anymore because for me to literally just pop out to go top up groceries costs me so much more because of fuel prices.
Sure.
Right? Listen to me.
Sure.
Because of the fuel prices, the app, well, the one I mostly use, you get to then be, let's say, have a premium account. Let's just call it a premium account where you either pay 90 Rand or 100 Rand for you to be on that account where you get savings much quicker in terms of discounts, in terms of the things that you buy, but you then don't pay for a delivery cost.
Sure.
Now, if you think about, you go to the store plus minus 6, 7, 5 times, it's like $350, 400 and something on just delivery costs if you are not on that 90 Rand per month payment.
Right.
And I think going into savings month, people need, and again, Andy, you can't think like that if you don't have the literacy you need. The nice thing about understanding money and these awesome things you can tell it to do for you, it's because you know better.
Yes,
Right.
that's true.
It's because you know you can be smart around it. You can navigate it in such a way that it will work for you.
Sure.
So if I'm going to save on fuel costs and I'm going to save on all the delivery for the month for me to get the stuff at home probably quicker, it means I don't even care to go anymore because my schedule has gotten quite hectic.
Yeah.
So it's fine. I probably save plus minus 1,000 Rand on just grocery shopping because I don't pay the delivery, because I no longer go to the stores. And these things will be different for so many people. Someone else might make that decision, after your conversation around, do you really need the LV? There's other brands that cost so much less. I was never a brand person. I've slowly started tapping into that because I also understand, I think now that I've lost my mom and I get to have some of her stuff, that quality is also so important.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean I must spend $10,000 on a bag.
Yeah.
I can spend $1,500 or $1,000 on still a nice brand that can last me 10, 15, 20 years, if not even much longer. And hey, man, I'll watch out for when it's on sale. So going into exactly,
Strategic buying.
Exactly.
Yes,
Going
come
into
on.
National Savings Month, I think not only in that month, but just going forward. Sit. See, I turn the phone the whole time.
Yeah,
and
we're
that's
always on our
fine.
phones, yeah.
That's fine. But I feel also use it in such a way that it can give you some benefits that you otherwise wouldn't notice.
Sure.
So Mina, I love putting things in all my different carts for shopping. I will not buy until it's on sale.
Right.
I will not spend $3,000 if I know I've spotted it at 1,270 at some point.
Yeah.
Because I believe I know better. I
Yeah.
know after 2 months, demand for it will have dropped.
Yeah.
Therefore, the prices will drop
Yes.
so that it can get us
Yeah.
to, for us to want it even more. Supply, demand, the economy,
Yeah.
all of those things, So I think people just need to play around with money, have that fun childhood relationship.
Yeah.
But for you to be smart with it, you need to know exactly how it works.
Correct.
Monopoly, the game of Monopoly. I found that it was actually also something that teaches a significant amount about investing in properties. You've got people paying you rentals. I find the game fascinating. Because I find that the educational value of it is far more than the fun aspect. But I'm perfectly happy to pretend with the people that are having fun. Having fun. What I would like, if you'd allow, Andisa, what I would like to challenge your audience to do, in particular the females, because we don't use this language. Because I don't know, it's like we are damsels in distress. Legacy,
Yeah.
generational wealth. Let's start thinking like that.
Yeah.
Let's start building that for ourselves. Most women love themselves some clothes, some handbags. How about you figure out if you were to do a line of your own? What are the economics of that industry? What does the import-export look like in South Africa? Where can we plug in so that we become less of the people that are just there to be consumers, but we create, we produce. I mean, we're the youngest population. This continent carries the youngest population. And as a result of that, other continents are exporting us.
Correct.
So rather than having this brain drain, sit together, figure out how to create wealth in our small circles and have those circles grow so that we can make the circle bigger.
So let's go do that now.
I want to take the conversation back to the workplace. I mean, I think the three of us here are leaders, and we've managed teams and people over the years. What role do you think as leaders we play in fast tracking some of these conversations for the people that we serve? Because if you look at our role in the workplace, how we're coaches, we're teachers, we're advisors. And I know Viwe used an example earlier with administrative staff in her business. And maybe I'll come to you, Amanda, just around, the active role we need to play in the workplace in creating spaces for these conversations to organically happen, where we start seeing that shift and more people saving. I think it's great that we can hold space for that conversation because we have the language and by and large we have the resources or proximity to resources. Perhaps, maybe let me use that. But not many do. So how do we flip the script and take, money matters back into the workplace by facilitating a fast-tracked journey for people to start realizing, the importance of saving outside of even just National Saving Month?
I think that's such a tricky one because you need different layers in that corporate environment, right? So that even you as the leader feel comfortable to have those conversations. People need to trust you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bon. People need to be able to be like, yo, last month was tough. What happened? And then you get into that conversation. If you lead with staunchness, and
I am the boss.
and I do know, and while you also gonna get there where you can afford this and afford. It's not like that. I think we can teach people differently by, I think, creating safe spaces first and foremost, where people can feel comfortable and heard when they are having some conversations that touch on money, that are directly impacted by money. If we don't create space, and I guess that's why there are financial wellness days. And I used to do a lot of those, at my previous company. And I enjoyed it. Again, hence these came about. I enjoyed it. My concern was when we leave, what then happens? It was just one day. And people had so many people to see that can educate and empower them about some level of wellness, when as it relates to money. But we walk away and we don't know what people are implementing or not doing.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I'd like to hope and wish and believe that I create the kind of space where people can have a conversation with me about anything.
Yeah.
So we as a team have literally daily check-ins. You don't have to always come in, but it's nice when you do because it's 8:45 until 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
It's literally time to just check in. How's everyone doing? And sometimes we cry. We've lost parents. Sometimes I'm like, I actually might have to cancel the rest of my afternoon meetings because my nanny, whatever, had to leave or whatever it is. And I think the more you are creating safe spaces where people feel like I can say something. I don't have to stick to the meeting. I don't have to stick to having certain things that cost me so much because I'm trying to be aligned with how everyone else is at work.
Yeah.
I think the more you have those kind of spaces as a leader, the more you are able to actually empower people and educate people. I mean, and we spoke about this earlier in the boardroom. When I started working, I had the cutest car, but I promise you it was the littlest car. It was comfortable, ne? Guys, I shopped around before I bought that car. And I made sure if I sat down and I said, that's the car I like, I'm like, okay, sharp, it's 30,000 rands more. What about the other car that was not my first option? When I make it more comfortable for myself, we spoke about an aircon. If that one, though, does then come with the aircon, with the electric windows, with a USB, Bluetooth, or whatever it is, does that make me comfortable?
Yeah.
Does it mean I need to drive that specific car, which is more expensive? And I'm saying this to the younger employees out there that we are also taking care of and grooming and mentoring and working with and developing as well, to say you really need to take your time in doing things.
Yeah.
You need to take the time and I think listen to other people and how they've done it. If nobody asks me, you will think I've always been I love comfortable cars.
Right.
I actually always have because my dad loved cars. My brothers love cool cars. So I grew up being in that kind of an environment.
Yeah.
But does that mean when I start working, I must get myself the comfortable car? Probably can't afford it. So it means I need to sit down and really do the exercise that says, which car can I consider? Which one costs less? Why would I not otherwise buy it? If I had to buy it, is it really a big problem? And I'm using that as an example because of the prices that were recently released, I think 2 weeks ago for the Gautrain.
Yeah.
How much it cost the Gautrain for you as an individual from Pretoria to Sandton. Thousands, tens of thousands of people every single day travel there. A lot of them are probably young people who now, if they really sit down and do the math, you'll realize maybe it's actually better you just get yourself the car. You need to realize maybe work is okay with not having you in the office every single day.
Yeah.
You can go twice, you can go 3 times, you can work virtually. I think there's so many nuances to all these things that if you don't create the safe space where people can have these conversations, say, Girl, did you see the Gautrain thing or did you see the Uber thing or whatever it is? I mean, even this morning, sorry, I see a lot of these things. I saw that Uber XL is coming to Joburg, Pretoria. It wasn't there before.
Correct.
And I'm like, sharp, whatever. But my point is, someone else might say something and I'm able to share that knowledge to say, actually, I know you're young. I know you just started working. Perhaps buying yourself a car 10 weeks ago or 10 months ago wasn't an option. But now that this, that, and this is happening, maybe actually do that for yourself, you know? And maybe even get a second hand, really.
Yeah.
So I think for me, those are the conversations that need to be happening that are a bit more personal, a bit more softer, on the, on the emotional side and on the relationship side with your employees. Otherwise, you're not able to really empower them and educate them and kind of guide them.
Yeah, lovely. All right, Viwe, I want to come to you before we close off our segment and our conversation. Our tagline on our podcast is unlocking the pay potential of our employees. How do you think leaders can actively and progressively do this in their different spaces?
First of all, I think lower the walls. Be more relatable to the people that you're working with. I sit in a position of privilege in my role at Vunani Securities. Being the CEO, I can influence the direction of the culture. And so I spent a significant amount of time getting to understand my team, learning my team as individuals, people as human beings, and then again as professionals. And in doing that, what I'm looking for is to understand where the weakness is, where the strength, who do I pair with who if I need to get things done. But moreover, it also lowers the barriers because then you become this accessible person. And running a flat structure, I do like to run a flat structure or a relatively flat structure because it is important to me that everyone on my team understands that contributions are important to me. And once you are more accepting of other people's contributions, they are in turn more accepting of you giving suggestions to them. So it's really relationship building in my opinion. And just to give it a semblance of relatability on what I was saying earlier on hopscotch and the journey that it takes. My first job, I was a trainee accountant. Well, my first job in the journey of finance and financial services, I was a trainee accountant and I was earning net 6,000 Rand. I couldn't afford a house to stay in as well as a car. I was studying honors part-time. And so I understood that for me and being in audit, what that meant is that you must travel around to different clients. So for me, the priority was getting a car. I lived with my brother for the first year. For the first year of my articles, I lived with my brother. I earned 6,000 Rand. 3,000 went to the car. 2,000 was petrol for the month. Then I don't quite have all my fingers. and then you have insurance. Insurance was about nearly 2,000 Rand as well.
Sure.
And at the time, and I understand that I am in good company in the HR fraternity here. At the time, I was then called into HR because it was mandatory for the business that I have medical aid. And they called me into a meeting to understand why I didn't have medical aid. And the theme of the conversation was an instruction for me to get on medical aid. So what I did is I put together a spreadsheet. I put down my income on one side. I put down my expenses on the other side. From the maths that I've given you now, you can already see I was living outside of my means.
Yeah, completely.
So I went into the HR manager's office, 21 turning 22, little girl, and they're like, it's company policy, you need to be on the medical aid. And I said, I accept and I respect that. Is there a way that you can meet me halfway so that I can meet your policies? Because as it stands, this is my financial situation. Look, the conversation ended with me without a raise, but without the requirement of me having medical aid, because practically it didn't make sense. And I was well outside of the budget as it was. And so I used to go to, there's a clinic in Sandton. When I was sick, I used to go to the clinic.
Yeah.
So it's about a lot of things is about living within your means and being comfortable that this is a journey. And it's not going to happen overnight. You're not going to get to the place where you are earning the executive salary. And even when you are, sometimes there's challenges there too.
Yeah. Ladies, I want to thank you so much for your time and for allowing us to lean into your wisdom. I think the conversation around the manuscript and how that needs to evolve as we evolve as leaders and as people in the workplace needs to go on that journey with us. This has been such a wonderful conversation. I've certainly learned a lot. And so I want to thank you, Amanda John-Ncube, who is financial services leader, author, and a business coach, as well as Ms. Viwe Tini, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Vunani Securities. And for those of you in the audience who want to connect with us at FloatPays, you can find us on www.floatpays.com. Alternatively, you can get in touch with the team on support@floatpays.com. And for me, that is signing off. Thank you very much for joining us.